Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And much like the Queen, we are in quarantine.
We hope everybody listening to this is doing well and staying safe and following the guidelines. We know it's a very difficult time for everyone, and we hope that this podcast can be a little bit of light relief for everyone. Just as a small thing, like, this is obviously not important at all in the grand scheme of things, but we would ask you guys, if you are sending us messages or leaving us reviews, we'd really appreciate it if you could keep it civil and please avoid getting too personal with your criticisms. That would really help us out. We know it's a difficult time for everyone, and if we could avoid making it any more difficult for each other.
We want this to be fun for you guys and fun for us too. This is something we just make in our flat on the weekends ourselves. So with that in mind, we've been coming up with some ideas for extras that we could do on the podcast or on social media. Thanks to everyone who's been letting us know the kind of stuff that they're interested in seeing. We're open to any and all suggestions.
Yeah, we asked our followers on Instagram if you guys had any ideas, and so a lot of you said you wanted more episodes, so we're going to do a bonus episode, hopefully early this week, on Beatrice's cursed wedding. Wedding so cursed that we've been trying to talk about it for the last 3 weeks and just haven't had time. So she's going to get her own bonus episode from us. And you had also asked for a quiz. So we have made a quiz that you can do with your families or on your own, and we're just trying to figure out the best way to get that to people that want it.
So we're thinking of setting up like a website, but until we've kind of got that figured out, you can email us at airheadspod@gmail.com and we can send you the PDFs of the quiz.
But anyway, on to the main events of this week. Let's take it from the top.
Yeah, well, we've got to start with the Queen. She headed to Windsor Castle on Thursday, where she will be self-isolating for the foreseeable future.
With Prince Philip.
Yeah, she immediately had Philip helicoptered in, which I thought was so funny. He was over at Wood Farm in Sandringham, which is his little pad. He is like pretty much always there.
But not anymore. And we wonder if this might have had something to do with it. We got a really good little detail in Pop Bitch's weekly newsletter. It's this legendary British newsletter for gossip and celebrity news. If you have any interest in that, you should definitely follow it. It's one of my favourite things, and they're doing daily installments at the moment. But anyway, they wrote, WhatsApp has been ablaze with rumours this week that Prince Philip has carked it. While it's probably only a matter of time before that rumour finally comes good, we hear that Phil has been making every day count in the meantime. Whispers from the royal grounds suggests that he has 3 regular lady callers and gets started on the drinking shortly after waking.
I mean, I feel like this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who knows anything about Philip, this behaviour.
But by God, he's 98.
Well, best of British. Yeah, it makes sense that the Queen has like absolutely snapped her fingers and brought him to her side.
But on Wednesday, the Queen had a couple of callers of her own in the form of the outgoing and incoming commanding officers of the HMS Queen Elizabeth. So this was her final meeting before decamping to Windsor, and it was one of her private audiences that she gives at Buckingham Palace. But in this instance, there were no handshakes, just bows from the officers.
She was also due to meet Boris Johnson face-to-face, but Number 10 insisted that they do it over the phone instead.
And apparently they're going to keep it up because, as you know, she has weekly audiences with the Prime Minister, but for the foreseeable future, they are going to be held via phone or possibly by a video link. Oh my God. Where is Peter Morgan's play about the Queen's Skype calls with Boris Johnson?
That's so good.
Helen Mirren, are you listening? Get ready.
I mean, it looks pretty good. You were saying that Meghan was very ahead of the curve with her video conference calls.
Oh my God, guys, do you remember that incredible moment when Meghan Skyped in to Harry's meeting in South Africa and everybody was freaking out? We were freaking out. Now they're all at it.
The palace has released a statement which goes, as a sensible precaution and for practical reasons in the current circumstances, a number of changes are being made to the Queen's diary.
Typically understated.
Yeah.
She was going to be heading to Windsor anyway next week for Easter, so they basically just moved her plans up a week, though the palace does say in the statement that it is likely the Queen will stay there beyond the Easter period, and they've already cancelled the summer garden parties at the palace, and they said they're going to make an announcement later about trooping the colour. They have, since they made this statement, postponed the state visit by the Emperor and the Empress of Japan, so I feel like it's only a matter of time before trooping is...
I'd be so surprised if trooping goes ahead this year. Also, Princess Beatrice's wedding has been scaled way back. A palace spokesman has said that the plans are under review and that they're particularly conscious of government advice in relation to both the well-being of older family members and large gatherings of people. Therefore, the planned reception in the Buckingham Palace gardens will not take place. The couple will carefully consider government advice before deciding whether a private marriage might take place amongst a small group of family and friends.
Like a 5-strong group, including Beatrice and Edo. So apparently they are very determined, and that's the story at the moment, is that they're going to be going ahead with this. But we will have more on this in our special bonus episode this week.
The Queen made her own statement later in the week on Thursday, and she had a special Instagram version that was kind of all designed up and used a lovely royal blue. And I mean, it was kind of a definite improvement on the usual kind of black and red and white that we see.
That we saw from Harry and Meghan, because they are...
They're no longer on the mailing list. Will and Kate got the blue version as well for Instagram.
Charles and Camilla.
Yeah, but not Harry and Meghan.
I particularly enjoyed that she started off straight away with this very amusingly casual reference to Philip and I, which serves two functions here. You know, letting everyone know he's not dead. As we said, that was a trending topic during the week, that everybody thought he had died for the 10th time. And also, she's marking her territory for those lady callers in Sandringham.
Yeah, I know. I mean, those lady callers are probably scrabbling around to try and find their own helicopters to get to Philip, I'd say. But it's very royal as a statement because there's no mention of coronavirus or even COVID-19, just a period of great concern and uncertainty. And she gives thanks to scientists, medical practitioners, and emergency public services.
Yeah, so very British in that sense. But then she goes on to say, at times such as these, I'm reminded that our nation's history has been forged by people and communities coming together to work as one, concentrating our combined efforts with a focus on the common goal. Now more than any time in our recent past, we all have a vitally important part to play as individuals, today and in the coming days, weeks and months. Many of us will need to find new ways of staying in touch with each other and making sure that loved ones are safe. I am certain we are up to that challenge. You can be assured that my family and I stand ready to play our part.
Well,
let's talk about this part.
This was certainly very rousing. I mean, it's interesting that like now we see that most of the family, the part that they have to play is staying at home. Like there's so many kind of older members of the family, and we'll talk later about Will and Kate's kind of stepping up and being the public face of this. But it's interesting, I think, to me, because the British response to crisis is so rooted in wartime and the Blitz mentality, which is very much like, if you alter your everyday life, you are letting the enemy win. And we saw that mentality as well after the terrorist attacks here, the 7/7 bombings, things like that, where it was seen as a sign of weakness if you allowed it to affect, going out to the shops or seeing friends.
Keep calm and carry on.
Exactly. And the thing is, the response to coronavirus is it's completely different. Like, you can't apply that logic, otherwise you're just going to keep spreading disease and making it worse. So they're having to kind of reshape, I think, the idea of what we do in a crisis.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because immediately when this statement came out, real monarchists were bursting with pride, and they were like, this is exactly what we want from the Queen. She's the one that will bring us all together. But to me, it felt like it was coming very late, and in a way it felt like too little too late. I thought You know, why not give a televised address? And why did she wait so long to make this statement in the first place? I mean, why did she wait so long to leave Buckingham Palace and go into self-isolation? You know, you have this sort of tricky position where some people suggested she was just trying to follow government advice and she didn't want to be overstepping or wading into a political issue when, you know, Boris hadn't issued any guidelines for that kind of shutdown yet. But to me, this is not a political issue at all.
No.
I really liked that there was a piece in The Spectator this week by Peter Hunt, who's the former royal editor for the BBC, and he wrote about what Buckingham Palace describes as the Queen's head of nation role, where she sends messages of condolence at times of national, international and Commonwealth tragedy. You know, this is very much what is happening right now. So he said that her delayed approach felt leaden in that sense. This was before she had made her personal statement. We have heard that there will be a televised address coming soon. It might have come out by the time this episode does. We heard that she would know the right moment of the crisis, according to Downing Street sources. But to me, it feels like we're in the right moment.
In the same way to how seeing Tom Hanks diagnosed with coronavirus, that woke a lot of people up around the world and in the US in particular, to the severity of COVID-19. Seeing the 93-year-old Queen of England and her 71-year-old son self-isolating earlier would have really hammered home the point to people in the UK, especially older people who are on the most at risk, that that's what they need to be doing. It's this idea of leading by example. But the problem is that the example that needs to be set, I think, is against this traditional British what we do in a crisis mentality.
Yeah, the idea of self-isolating doesn't really fit in with that stiff upper lip stoicism that we so expect from the royals.
Yeah, it's both this like stoicism, but then also the idea of like everyone crowded around the old Joanna in a bar during the Blitz as the bombs fall around with a rowdy old song and toast the bloody old Queen. That's not going to happen now.
Which I think is what makes it so notable that the first royals to take coronavirus seriously were Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. You know, we talked last week and the week before about how they had left Archie in Canada when they were visiting the UK for their final round of engagements. And the reaction to that was really emblematic of that kind of, oh, they're overreacting, you know, they need to be more stoic about it and they're, you know, being petty or whatever.
They're putting it down to spite rather than being sensible.
But now it does seem very sensible in retrospect, yet we're still getting these really heightened stories about how Meghan is overreacting in her approach to the pandemic. Like we saw a headline this week in the Daily Mail, Meghan demands staffers wear latex gloves and follow a strict hygiene protocol. I thought was so funny. Like this diva bitch, she's demanding good hygiene at a time like this. It's how dare she?
Yeah, the Daily Mail talked to an insider who said that Meghan was taking steps to protect her family, requiring everyone on their team, the people who buy groceries and run errands, to wear latex gloves at all times and are to follow a strict hygiene protocol. Only a select few will be able to interact with her, Harry and Archie. She said she's keeping it to a bare minimum. Which
is now, around the world, the government advice.
Yeah.
Although in the UK, it's still on Sunday when we're recording this, only people who are displaying symptoms need to take these kind of precautions.
Yeah. This friend told the Daily Mail that her home is her sanctuary and it's a place of peace and calm. And Harry gave us a glimpse inside the sanctuary.
Yes, this was very exciting for a blank wall, but very sadly, although unsurprisingly, the Invictus Games have been postponed, not even to later in the year, but to next year. And Harry recorded a video to make this announcement, which was filmed on a webcam, very MacBook photo booth style. And all we can see is a cream wall and this dark wood cupboard door. What is it? What is this telling you, Tom, about Harry and Meghan's sanctuary?
Well, I mean, first off, I thought maybe he recorded this in our flat because it's such a rental property cream. We thought that maybe like Meghan would be more into like white walls and, you know, cool tones and things like that. But then we remembered that, you know, this isn't their forever home, and maybe magnolia was inevitable.
I would love if they took this opportunity to give us a house tour, or maybe to show us a hand washing video in their bathroom or in their kitchen. That's the content I want.
Yeah, they need to get on Instagram Live like everybody else in the entire world at the moment.
But they did issue not one, but 2 social posts about the virus. So the first one was the first statement from any member of the royal family about the virus, which was incredible. It was their blue quote template. And as I saw the quote, I was wondering, where is the credit for this quote? Who is this coming from? Is this a Nelson Mandela? Is it another Diana? No. This is a direct from Harry and Meghan. Meghan quoting herself, "This moment is as true a testament there is to the human spirit." How delighted was she with herself when she came up with that?
Yeah.
She wrote this whole post to give her the one line that would make that quote graphic, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They kind of said the stuff which is now the usual lines that we're getting about kind of uncertain times, the need to support one another. And they said, "We will be sharing information and resources to help all of us navigate the uncertainty, from posting accurate information and facts from trusted experts to learning about measures we can take to keep ourselves and our families healthy, to working with organisations that can support our mental and emotional well-being."
Yeah, so they're really approaching this from like the mental health standpoint, which brings us to their second post that they made. This eye-searing shade of blue.
Yeah, it was like a pure cyan. It reminded me of the launch of Jay-Z's Tidal service, because everyone was changing their profile pictures, or artists were changing their profile pictures to that turquoise. But they quite cleverly used a less saturated version. This was like designed to burn into your eyeballs. And she also used, I say she, assuming Meghan was behind this, but maybe she wasn't, used chalk duster font, which like really is all you need to know about it. It's one of my least favourite fonts.
But what did she say, Tom?
She said, "Today I feel blank." Are we all meant to be sharing this image with our own like words?
Serena Williams had the top comment. She said scared. The post really reads like Meghan to me.
Yeah.
With everything going on, it's a lot to take in. Many of us may feel confused, or alone, or anxious, or scared. And in isolation, some of us may just feel bored, or that you don't know what to do with yourself without your normal routine. It's perfectly normal to be feeling any of these things. I mean, the punctuation and the copy is not as clean as it could be, but we understand they're working with a reduced staff.
Yeah.
Digital Dave is no longer here to help with those matters.
They place a particular emphasis on loneliness and wanting to help people with their mental health at this time, which is safer territory than trying to talk about the science, because there's a lot of updates coming quite quickly. But people were still annoyed with what they said, because one of the points is, if you're home and feeling bored, you can digitally train to be a counsellor and help someone who really needs your support. What an amazing way to use this time. I think some people thought this was belittling the work of professionally trained counsellors who don't do that job just because they're bored and have time on their hands. And I think some people were a little offended that Harry and Meghan would think that anyone could just train for that job in a matter of hours.
But then we've seen other members of the family with the Shout crisis helpline. You know, Will was saying he was going to train to be a counsellor by text. So, you know, Harry and Meghan aren't alone in this. And it's a very important function. You know, they mentioned in the post, particularly from people who may be suffering in situations of domestic abuse, this is a horrendous situation for them to be in.
Yeah.
And that a counsellor can help in that circumstance. You know, they're always going to get tons of negative comments on these kind of posts. But I thought this was, apart from the image, it was a nice message. And it also contained a line of pure Tig Meghan-ness. But here's the good thing. Because right now we need to hear good things, right? Yes, there is isolation and physical distancing, but there doesn't have to be loneliness.
Chills.
I read that and heard it in Meghan's voice.
The Tig is alive and well.
But just hours after that first Sussex Royal Instaquote post went up, Kensington Royal released a video which featured Prince William launching a fundraising appeal for the National Emergencies Trust and saying, "Whenever and wherever adversity strikes, the people of the UK have a unique ability to pull together." This was very similar to what the Queen would later say in her own message, although he does actually say the word COVID-19. And I thought it was so interesting because it was such a different spirit from those joking remarks that he took a bit of heat for during the visit to Ireland. You know, as we said at the time, everyone was making jokes at the start of this crisis, but what really sets the royals apart is that those jokes can really come back to bite you, and, you know, particularly when you come out with a very earnest video message just a couple of weeks later.
Yeah, royal watchers were very quick to point out that Sussex Royal had beaten them to the punch as first members of the family to break their silence on coronavirus. And we were wondering, does the slightly poor quality of the video suggest that maybe this was knocked out immediately after seeing Sussex Royal post?
I mean, they do look like they're playing catch up. Like, the 2-hour time frame is very unusual.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, that video looks like an iPhone video to me.
Yeah, which, you know, if it's good enough for Lady Gaga, maybe it should be good enough for Prince William.
But I also think we really have seen Will's role being inflated in the last few days. This seems like quite a turning point for him, which started earlier this week when we saw a piece in Vanity Fair by the royal reporter Katie Nicholl, who said that William and Kate will temporarily divert their attention from young children, Kate's primary work, and conservation, William's key cause, to helping the vulnerable and providing support to the British public as the nation deals with one of the greatest challenges since the war. I mean, I don't think anybody wants the results of the 5 Big Questions survey right now, but it did strike me, this very explicit statement of, this is Kate's work, this is Will's work, this is what they're going to do now.
Yeah.
Like, again, telling us rather than showing us. There was a source who said the Cambridges are not in the vulnerable sector and they want to help. Their aides are going through the latest government advice, but it's fair to say the focus of their work will shift. Supporting the community and vulnerable people in society is more important right now. Obviously, everyone is shifting their focus to coronavirus. Yeah. You don't need to give us this big prologue about, here it comes, guys, get ready, let's everybody brace themselves for some show-stopping work on coronavirus.
Yeah.
Just do the work, just show it to us.
Will is very concerned with showing it to us because he is the coronavirus king. He is the face of royal family in this uncertain time. Obviously his dad and his gran are in vulnerable positions, so it's his opportunity to step up and show us all what King Will's going to look like.
Yeah, and this was the focus of a piece in the Daily Mail this week, and they've talked about it elsewhere as well. They had an author of a number of royal history and humour books, Nigel Cawthorne, telling the Mail, "It is entirely sensible for Prince William to act as placeholder for the Queen. There has to be a physical presence to the monarchy, not just a virtual one. He's third in line to the throne and in robust health like his brother, and COVID-19 is unlikely to be any serious threat for him or his wife or children. He will do a great job."
Well, I'm glad he's so confident.
They also had Robert Jobson, the royal editor for the Evening Standard, backing him up, saying that Will acting as the Queen's placeholder is the natural thing to happen. And we saw Will really embracing this role. He made a surprise visit to the London Ambulance Service 111 call centre in Croydon on Friday with Kate.
Oh, it was actually Thursday that they went there, and we just heard about it on Friday.
This really came as a surprise. It had been embargoed. Richard Palmer, the Express's royal reporter, explained that it was embargoed partly to avoid clashing with the Queen's big message, but also over concerns about crowds gathering. But the big I mean, the big standout moment from this for you and I was a superb video of Will really giving it loads with the hand sanitizer.
And this is, despite the fact, guys, that he finds it weird, all that
We
hand
all know his uncomfortable feelings
about washing his hands. But he wanted us to know that he had his routine down perfectly.
He's been practicing. He was really giving it welly, and the video, he made sure everyone captured it. This video is so funny. We'll post it on Instagram later today so you can see, but he is constantly looking around, making sure that everyone's taking it in. Next to him, Kate is just like very normally applying hand sanitizer.
Like someone who might wash their hands on a daily basis.
They also, here we go. They sanitized their hands twice. They didn't do any handshakes, and they kept a good distance from workers. Although, in the pictures from the event, there doesn't look like there's really any distance between them.
Yeah, they are pretty close. Also, one of the stuff, like, kind of instinctively went to shake Will's hand, and he said, "Don't shake hands," and brought his hand down as if it was going to chop her hand off.
That's funny. I would have liked that in a video. He also met a call handler who used to work at Buckingham Palace, and she remembered meeting him as a baby with Princess Diana, which must have been very nice. He asked her, "Was I behaving myself? A rowdy little child?" And she said, "I can't say, sir. The press are here."
This was, though, one of the most divisive appearances that we've seen from the Cambridges. It's the first engagement for them under the new COVID-19 guidelines. It's quite possibly going to be the last one as well, because the rules are just going to get stricter over the next few days and weeks. The top comment on the Instagram post was, "I love you all, but seriously, what are you doing? Stay off the streets, for crying out loud. Why are those people sitting right next to each other?"
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. Like, it's very rare that the top comment on a Kensington Royal post is a negative one.
Yeah.
Very, very rare. And also, when I was scrolling down, I saw quite a lot of them were saying, like, "Stay home. Why aren't you staying home?" So I think there's two sides to this. Like, on the one hand, there are the critics who felt like they should be leading by example, like you were saying, and staying home. While on the other, there is a very different set of expectations for the royals. Like, this is them making the case for the royals as unifying figures who can offer hope in times of crisis. You know, during the Blitz, the King and Queen walked around areas that had been hit by bombs.
But this is not the Blitz. It's a very different situation.
I think it really makes plain the kind of line they tried to straddle between being of the people and being just like you and I, and then also the fact that they have this position above the people and as statesmen or leaders of the nation or whatever you like to call it. So in one sense, they're trying to play by very different rules from everyone else, but at the same time, that's sending the message, well, if the future king can go and not observe these social distancing guidelines, then surely it's safe enough for me to do so too.
Yeah, and I think the photos are very impactful, but I wonder who is benefiting from that impact. Like, to me, it kind of seems like it's the royal family benefiting from it, or who are meant to. It's showing that them being proactive and out there, but I still think that is misplaced and an old-fashioned way of responding to this situation.
I do wonder, though, if they thought, oh, if we did this by video call or Zoom or whatever, it would be safer, but it just wouldn't have the same visual impact of fresh pics, particularly with Kate in a rather striking outfit, which we'll talk about later. But seeing those does make it more newsworthy and does draw more attention and put a bigger spotlight on these emergency service workers than if they had used old pictures in an Instagram post.
And I guess then the only question is, do these workers need more spotlight on them, or do they need to be let to get on with their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can see where they're coming from, but I'm not saying that that's the wisest approach they could have taken.
Yeah.
The Kensington Royal Instagram post later that day, which was signed the Duke of Cambridge, Will wrote, "All of us have a part to play if we're going to protect the most vulnerable. That means acting on the latest expert advice, staying home if we or those we live with have symptoms, and avoiding non-essential contact to help reduce the spread of the virus." I think that could probably read quite jarring for people in other countries, including other Commonwealth countries, where the guidelines are much stricter than in the UK, like in Canada, or, you know, basically anywhere other than the UK.
Yeah, exactly.
And also talking about the latest expert advice is risky because it's changing all the time. So him saying stay home if you have symptoms is something that is accurate on Friday, but may have changed by Saturday even.
Yeah, exactly. It's why kind of when comparing the two approaches, we were pleased to see that Harry and Meghan seem to be really taking the mental health route, because it's something that they have, you know, more experience in talking about, and it allows scientists to focus on the scientific advice. When you have such global audiences as the Sussexes and the Cambridges do, it's dangerous to be issuing any advice that isn't, go to this link to see the most up-to-date advice in your area.
I would have preferred if they had just instructed people to go to the NHS website.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, speaking about educating yourselves, we've got a little education update on the future king.
We probably all know by now that Kate is homeschooling George and Charlotte, and presumably she's going to have to add Louis into the class as well, now that this tiny little pub landlord has had to close his establishment according to government guidelines.
I mean, I think it might be a bit of a stretch to say Kate is homeschooling them. They are working with a reduced household, but I'm pretty sure they've got someone else to do this kind of job, although perhaps this will lead to George expanding his art history knowledge.
Well, yeah, I definitely think he's had an art class this week, because we saw his Mother's Day card for Kate just earlier today before we recorded, and it's really exceptional. I was very impressed.
Tom was even inspired to work on his own patterns.
I'm very interested to see how much influence either Kate or Will might have had in the formation of this card.
I mean, I would love to see Prince Charles's response. Like, Prince Charles saw this and he immediately went and dumped all his watercolor paintings. He's shaking right now. He's not going to be the future king artist that he thought he was going to be.
It made me think of how many watercolors Charles has probably done for the Queen. And, like, she's not been interested at all, and she's just, like, loves a scrawl by Andrew that she puts on the Buckingham Palace fridge.
I know, the Queen posting a picture on Instagram of her with the Queen mother instead of her with her kids. I mean, I really do think she was probably like, a picture of me and young Andrew. And people had to say, absolutely not.
Or they probably said, yeah, no, that's what we put up.
Yes, Mum. On to quote of the week. For me, the quote of the week came from Peter Hunt's piece in The Spectator that we were talking about earlier, where he probed whether this coronavirus crisis could also prove an existential crisis or threat to the monarchy. He mentioned that this is a family that thrives on being visible, and said, "The Queen has always believed that her family needs to be seen in action to maintain its place in the public's affection. House of Windsor action has been mothballed. No state visits, prime ministerial audiences in person, or garden parties. Even Princess Beatrice's forthcoming wedding is being drastically downscaled. To put it bluntly and not very elegantly, will the royals appear increasingly irrelevant as the number of plaques that go unveiled increases?"
I feel like the royal family is in like a constant battle to seem relevant and necessary. The whole coronavirus situation is going to probably show us so many things in society that we thought were a lot more important than they actually are. And I think if the royal family is top of that list, it's not a bad thing.
Like, if you've got your most senior members in isolation, perhaps the whole family will be in isolation by this time next week, who knows? People will possibly start to realise that they actually don't do all that much, but they do cost us a lot. And they might start to realise, you know, I'm not really missing seeing the Queen at her engagements or Charles at his engagements.
Yeah.
That might lead them to wonder, what is the point of the monarchy?
Maeve, did you have a fit for a queen?
You bet I did. Getting towards the end of the week, I thought, oh, we're going to be dropping these fit for a king queens for a while because there's just nothing happening. And then, boom, Kate comes out and kills it. This was the most exciting part about the visit for me because she wore, for the first time ever in public, a trouser suit. And not just any trouser suit, a sort of dusty rose-coloured one from M&S with a pair of Hugo Boss pumps that we had seen before. They were grey embossed leather. The fit was not ideal. The trousers, I thought, looked a bit too short, but it was otherwise, I thought, a pretty perfect outfit for this event and this particular time. It was very uplifting in that it was new. It wasn't like a somber rewear.
Yeah.
It was a very cheerful, yet at the same time a muted shade of pink. And it was at the same time supporting British retail.
Yeah.
Because M&S have had a bad week. They've warned of the severe impact the virus is going to have on the business. This is a suit that is in stores now and online now, so people who are sitting at home can buy it and it'll
sit around in their flats wearing a pink pantsuit.
I mean, I think it'll really give a boost to the British High Street, and that is something that Kate has always been very good at. Overall, very thoughtful in terms of affordability and general cheer.
What about our first in line?
I think it's got to be Will.
Yeah, for me, Will is first in line, not necessarily because I agree with what he's doing, but I think he is doing the most for the royal family in terms of trying to be visible and seem relevant and do the most.
I agree. I think he's doing what he needs to do to preserve the institution of the monarchy. And also, I think he's doing a very nice job of spotlighting those critical workers and referring directly to coronavirus.
Yeah.
You know, I think he's in a different position because where Charles has to follow Mummy's lead, Will has a bit more flexibility there. And especially with social media, he can use social media to showcase a more modern approach to leadership. Also, if he hadn't made those jokes in Ireland, it would be a lot easier to praise him for this.
Yeah, definitely. He shot himself in the foot a couple of weeks ago. But next week, it's kind of difficult for us to say what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah, well, we'll see. As long as there's something to talk about, we'll keep doing the podcast. But in the meantime, look out for our bonus episode on Beatrice and Edo. And also we should have the quiz ready pretty soon. If there are any like past topics or any kind of flashbacks you guys would like us to revisit, please let us know. We're open to any and all suggestions.
If you like this episode, please leave us a 5-star review and tell a friend. We'd really appreciate it.
You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at AirheadsPod and on Facebook at Airheads.
You can email us to get your hands on the quiz at airheadspod@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a good week and please stay safe.
Bye.
Of the coronavirus, of the coronavirus, of the coronavirus.